Hello. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Leah Frieden, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Fayetteville Public Library, and welcome to those that are watching through live stream as well. Before you leave today, please do take a moment to fill out those evaluations that we've left for you. Those help us to plan for future programs. And speaking of future programs, I hope you'll consider joining us again tomorrow at 2 p.m. for Silas Hunt, a documentary screening and discussion with the documentary's assistant producer, Brian Petty. It is sure to be a great event. I'd like to start by giving a huge thanks to the University of Arkansas Special Collections and to the Department of Music for bringing us this program today. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Joshua Youngblood. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. We're very fortunate in Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas and Arkansas to have a lot of events happening today. So I'm really, really appreciative of everyone taking the time to be here with us for what I think will be a really, hopefully enjoyable, well, definitely enjoyable and hopefully informative 2 hours. So I'll get started with some remarks, and then we're going to move into music. So do stick around for the music. And as a Black History Month event, we're particularly excited to be able to talk about Florence Price. And in Fayetteville today, there are several different Black History Month events going on. So check your calendar, check the public library's calendar, and make the most of this month. And I'm very excited to be here. So welcome to Resonant Voices. And just to introduce myself again, my name is Joshua Youngblood, and I'm Associate Dean for Special Collections in the University of Arkansas Libraries. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of the work that we do in special collections throughout the day. But I want to say that on behalf of the University of Arkansas Libraries and our dear colleagues from the Department of Music, it is truly an honor that you're joining us here in Fayetteville Public Library, one of our favorite public spaces, to celebrate Black History Month. And I want to say that personally, I'm very excited and humbled to be able to talk about Florence Price, who I've had the great fortune to be in my life as an archivist since I came to the university some 15 years ago at this point. She's a remarkable woman, a remarkable Arkansan artist, and an icon whose legacy Special Collections has the great privilege to serve not only every day in our work, but for posterity. And so I want to take a moment to also give thanks to Special Collections Director of Public Services, Jennifer Day, who's here with us, and our reading room coordinator, Cassidy Long, who's joining us as well. And Cassidy actually assembled an exhibit in the back. And do take a moment to please enjoy this exhibit. I'm going to mention it a few times in my remarks because not only are there original manuscript examples from the Florence Price archives back there, but it's actual manuscripts of some of the pieces that will be performed later today. And they also are evidence of the long journey and really remarkable saga of the Florence Price materials and how they are available to researchers, publishers, professional performers, and near and dear to my heart, the students at the University of Arkansas. So it's a great joy to be able to bring these precious artifacts to you, but I want to make sure that you understand something. The University Libraries preserves and makes these resources available for everyone. And everyone is welcome to enjoy and use these materials. And so even though they are really amazing collection of resources from the life and work of Florence Price, and they are sought after and considered precious by now millions of people around the world, they're available to anyone to use. And so you can visit us here in Fayetteville. You can work with Cassidy Long and Jennifer Day remotely and our research services team. You can enjoy our digital collections. You can reach out to us to create copies for you. We want to make sure you get to not only these resources, but everything we have in our collection. So, as her biographers and many latter-day students and devotees have noted, the details of Florence Price's life were obscure for a long time and are actually still being discovered and unfolding now. And her archives that we have here in Fayetteville provide some important details, but scholars around the world are continuing to make her amazing story and significance better known and appreciated. And I'll mention this in a few minutes, but it seems like every day a new recording is being released. And there for a while, it's like there was a premiere of a new piece, and a new biography is coming out. this getting it through the press right now. And to think back just 10, 20, 30 years ago when the story of this absolutely amazing composer and individual from Little Rock was little known by anyone, and to where we are now, it's been a great honor of mine to be a part of that, and our team at Special Collections to help that. But we're also we're only part way there. The story of Florence Price is going to continue. So Florence Beatrice Smith was born April 9th, 1887 in Little Rock. She was musically gifted. Her mother, Florence Irene Smith, guided her musical training from basically as early as she could possibly do it. She began performing on piano by age 4 and had published her first piece by age 11. Her father, Dr. James Smith, was a well-respected dentist, and he was sought by patients across racial lines. And this is important to note, that in Little Rock of the 1880s and 1890s, while there was segregation, it was not the stringent segregation that we would come to understand later, and that would strongly impact Florence Price's later life. Her family was part of a very important black middle class in the city that also gave rise to the incredibly significant composer William Grant Still, among other writers, educators, lawyers. In fact, the Smiths were close friends with such leading figures as Scipio Jones, who was the first African-American lawyer to be admitted to practice in the United States Supreme Court, also living in Little Rock, and he was the lawyer that represented the Elaine 12 after the Elaine massacre, a case which he successfully adjudicated. Florence Price was a very successful student, and she actually graduated from the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston by the age of 19. There she studied composition, organ performance, and music education, which she used in her career right away. While she was a successful student, even being featured as organ performer at her own graduation, and being one of the highlighted pianists and organists during her time there in New England, she continued to face racial bias that whole time. There are programs from her time at New England where she's listed as Mexican, still denoting her race, but she had been advised since beginning her musical career and her career in academia to sometimes pass if she could, and she did that at times when she was in college. After graduating, she served on music faculty at Shorter College back in Little Rock from 1906 to 1910, and then at Clark University in Georgia from 1910 to 1912, where she also became the head of the music department in just a short number of months. She returned to Little Rock in 1912 and married the lawyer Thomas Price. Her family moved to Chicago after racial violence, though, in 1927, so she was only back in Little Rock for a little more than a decade. In Little Rock is where they got their family started. She had children, but then they had to join the Great Migration. The Little Rock of Price's childhood was disappearing. And after years of increasingly stringent segregation laws and racial violence, and then specifically the horrific public lynching of John Carter in 1927, the Prices, like so many others, had to finally move away from their home, and she would never return to Little Rock to live. But it was in Chicago that she studied orchestration and harmony under Carl Bush, that she began taking postgraduate classes at the Chicago Music College. She studied with other significant composers of the time, and she started to re-embrace her career as a composer. This whole time, of course, she was a devoted mother to her children, Florence Louise, and her daughter Edith Cassandra, and her son Thomas, who had passed away at a young age in 1920. So the picture up here on the left, you can see her with her children before they left and while Thomas was still with them. That's a photo that's from our archive that is available to you. She was working as a mother, but then her marriage did come on hard times. And because of abuse, her marriage ended in 1931. And then Price lived with friends. Among her friends were Margaret Bonds, the famed composer, as well. And it was at this point that as a single mother, she really began her career in earnest. Bonds, among other of her friends and colleagues in Chicago, helped premiere Price's work. And Margaret Bonds and others helped raise her profile as she became better known in Chicago's growing and really vibrant Black arts community. As a single mother, she sought work where she could, even playing organ at silent movie theaters. She had married again in 1931, but that was another unhappy marriage, and they only lived together for a little while, and so she was back to being a single mother and had to make ends meet the best she could. But she found great success as a composer pretty quickly in the 1930s. Her symphony in E minor won the Florence Prize in 1932, and it was premiered by the Chicago Symphony the next year in 1933, beating out her good friend Margaret Bonds, who came in second. So this made Price the first African-American woman to have a major performance by a prominent American symphony. So that is the fact that will make us always remember Price. But as we talk more and you hear more from music today, think about more than just being the first African-American woman to have a symphony performed. Though that was her first major work, Price would also have music performed through the Works Progress Administration, or the WPA, ensembles of the 1930s. She was very active in women's orchestra, including the Chicago Women's Orchestra, throughout the 1930s and 40s. She performed piano and organ, much celebrated for those performances. So she was a very active musician, and she did have other pieces actually performed by the Chicago Symphony. I mentioned earlier, but she was part of a very vibrant community of Black intellectuals, artists, and leaders in Chicago, and had connections nationally and internationally. So this photo, another photo from our archive here, shows her at a party in honor of one of her friends. And she was part of this community that was really uplifting each other and enabling people's work. So among her great collaborators that included Langston Hughes and other poets. She featured poets of the Black Renaissances in Harlem and Chicago. She worked with people around the country to develop libretti. And her correspondence speaks to these deep connections to intellectual life and cultural life across the country within the Black community. Price also really mined the depths of African-American folk and spiritual music, while incorporating, of course, romantic styles and modernist music styles in her compositions. One of the most moving experiences I've had with the manuscript, or working with the manuscripts at the University of Arkansas, was actually coming upon a piece where she had put an annotation on the top of the music, crediting the source for the lyrics. And the source was a formerly enslaved woman who had also joined the Great Migration to come to Chicago, and that Price had befriended, gathered the song, and then put it into art song form. But all the while, Florence Price had to continue to advocate for herself as a professional. Despite her triumphs as a composer, she faced struggles throughout her career to find consistent performances and publications of her work. So she wasn't always able to actually make a living as a composer, despite her accolades. In her archives, there are many examples of her work on this, and she was diligent and persistent, to her great credit. These include applications for ASCAP and other professional memberships, of course, letters arguing for her own publishing rights, and then letters like the one on the left here to a conductor, which is following up on the praise that he had offered her to actually say, do you want the scores? Are you going to perform this piece? Should I be sending you more material about this? In the middle there is a ledger listing 10 of her students, and note the date, 1951 and 52. So at the very end of her life, after she had been a successful composer for decades at this point, she is still conducting lessons in order to make ends meet. On the right there is just one page from her 1952 ASCAP application. And ASCAP, for those that don't know, is the Association of Composers that allows you to put copyright on your work and to be paid royalties. And so in one of the entry fields here, it says, please list any published works. And it has this little small space there. And so she's written in there, insufficient space. And then at the bottom, she's filling in unpublished works and has to fill it all the way up and then writes notes on the side because it's also insufficient space. Another one of those professional triumphs and important moments that I hope will help Florence Price to be remembered forever is the performance by Marian Anderson. And some of you might know about this performance. In the 1930s and 1940s, it was a watershed moment in not just the culture of Washington, D.C., but really of the nation. In my time as a graduate student in U.S. history, this was a day's lecture for us, and it's really important. And so if you haven't heard about this, I just want to mention it a little bit. In this performance, which was scheduled to be at the Washington Theater in 1939, but then the Daughters of the American Republic insisted that it be moved or canceled in that venue. And after a second unsuccessful venue, Eleanor Roosevelt intervened, and it was held at the Lincoln Memorial instead. So you might have seen footage of this performance, and there's an incredible documentary from a few years out there. So in the performance, Marian Anderson, one of the most acclaimed singers of the time, performs "My Soul's Been Anchored in the Lord." After the performance, Price was invited to have an audience with Eleanor Roosevelt. And in her archives here at the University of Arkansas Libraries, there's actually correspondence on that White House letterhead of their continuing relationship. So Anderson's performance was a pivotal moment, and Florence Price's music was integral to that moment. And of course, she worked with Marian Anderson much more than just that one song. I think the number that I've read is that Marian Anderson had mastered and recorded 39 Price songs. But after she passed away, even after these monumental moments, most of her compositions fell out of publication for decades. She's little represented in historiography from the 60s and 70s. She passed away in 1953, but there's little scholarly work on her. Some of her songs do stay in print, but not nearly as much as there should be. Florence Price completed more than 300 pieces of music that we know of. There's probably some that we don't quite have. And yet still, to this day, which is a great thing, there are new pieces being performed and recorded and premiered. So how did we get there? So there was a discovery, as it's often called, in which I'm very proud that the University of Arkansas Libraries was a part, in 2009, of a massive archive that had been rumored but never actually seen before. So in a summer house that Florence Price had owned in St. Anne outside of Little Rock, that had then passed to one of her daughters, in the attic was a large body of material. In fact, the vast majority of her manuscripts were there. When the owners of the property discovered that, and that's Vicki and Daryl Gatwood, they looked around. And while as a librarian, I'm supposed to tell you always go to the search engine first and always go and use the good search tools and databases, Google is part of the story. So the Gatwoods went to Google and they asked some other folks in the neighborhoods, like, what do we do with these materials? And so they soon discovered that Florence Price was a big deal. And then they also discovered that there was a finding aid that is a description of the archives already available on the University of Arkansas Library's website. And so when they found that, then they were able to say, oh, people are collecting her, and then we have some avenues to move forward with this. So this is a timeline, which I call after the treasure trove. Treasure is kind of a weird word to use for manuscript material, but really when you think about the impact that it had, it really was a treasure, what was found. So discovered by the Gatwoods, 2009. And I want to give credit here to Tom Dillard and Tim Nutt, who used to be with Special Collections. Tom Dillard was head of the Special Collections Department, and Tim Nutt was the head of our manuscripts. So when the Gatwoods reached out to them, they were enthusiastic, of course. And he said, oh yeah, amazing. Tim Nutt got in a car and drove to Chicago. And so I'll show you some pictures of what he found in Chicago when he got there. But they worked with the Gatwoods to make sure that material could be brought into the University of Arkansas. By 2014, we had done work to bring in the material and make a separation between stuff that was heavily damaged and things that could be made available to researchers soon. Now, that 5 years might seem like a long time, but given the condition of the materials, that's, I would argue, actually a pretty fast time. But when people started finding out that the Florence Price treasure trove had been, in fact, discovered, requests were pouring in. So we were trying to move as fast as we possibly could. Also in 2014, her granddaughter reached out to us with additional music, and so we got yet another donation of archive. By 2015, we were able to release MC98A. So MC988, I'll talk about in just a second, we'd actually had at the libraries since the 1970s. 988A was the addendum, was the new material we were able to bring in. So we released some of it, and it was immediately of use and requested by everyone. From then, from 2014-15 forward to today, has seen this exponential increase in performance and recording of Florence Price, which we're going to enjoy some of that music performed in just a second. So from there to the present, part of what we're doing in Special Collections is working with donors and scholars for new material. So we've actually brought in several new collections since then. So in 2016 is when we finally got to the place where we could release some of the damaged material. And I'll talk more about why that took so long, but essentially we had to put a waiver in place even at that point after mitigation because the damage was so extensive, and yet the community need and the scholarly need was so profound, we found a way to get it out. From 2016, another wave of performances and premieres started, including in 2018, which is one of these pivotal moments in the story of Florence Price's later recognition, which is the premiere by Jing Kang at Fort Smith with the Fort Smith Symphony of Violin Concerto No. 2. And that was the first time that the Violin Concerto No. 2 was only rumored to even exist, and then once it was found in the treasure trove, the new materials, we were able to get it into the hands of Jing Kang and other conductors and arrangers and have it performed in 2018. Or I'd say we didn't get it performed, Jing Kang and the Fort Smith Symphony got it performed. And then publications, Schirmer Publishers worked with the family to, again, formalize some of the publication process. Yet another archive was found in 2022, which the libraries worked to acquire. And then since then, we've had 2 more archives come to us. So from 2009 to present, we've actually had 6 archives total add to the Florence Price materials and resources out there. So I said there's a story that goes a little bit before this, though. So I want to mention a couple of names here of librarians and professors in Arkansas that did really important work. I mentioned earlier that the materials that we have actually predate that 2009. If you were to Google today, you might think that Florence Price wasn't studied or was totally forgotten before 2009. And that really wasn't the case. Mary Hudgens, who is a librarian from Arkansas, proud U of A grad from 1924. She had been studying Florence Price for decades, together with Barbara Jackson, Dr. Barbara Jackson, who was a professor here at the U of A in our Department of Music, as well as at Arkansas Tech before that. They facilitated a donation from Florence Price's daughter, Florence Price Robertson, that actually began in 1974, came to us in 1975. These images here are glimpses into that original archive and includes some manuscript material, not very much, but also correspondence, photographs, biographical information. Those ASCAP applications I showed you earlier actually come from this original donation of material we have. So we made these limited number of scores and professional documents available as best we could. A couple years after that, we acquired a reproduction of Symphony E minor, which had not been available to researchers and performers in a full score form until it came to us. And then throughout the 80s and 90s, the University of Arkansas Libraries was actually in the practice of making that available to schools to perform, where it hadn't been available before that. And we developed close relationships, of course, with Barbara Jackson, but also Dr. Jim Greason and others who continued to help us explore the story. And of course, Dr. Jim Greason would go on to do a documentary about Florence Price with the new materials that came in 2009. So when I think about this legacy of Florence Price and think about our role in it, I'm very proud about that. But I also just am so grateful for people who recognize these stories and do the work of keeping them alive and going forward. And so Mary Dingle Hudgens is one of these people. And so try not to get choked up talking about Mary Dingle Hudgens. Every day in Special Collections, it seems like I opened some box that she touched. And what's important about her story to me is that she took her interest and passions and her devotion to everyone in the state of Arkansas, and she carried it through her life. So she began a correspondence with Florence Price's daughter in 1968. So I had said that there was little scholarly interest, but Mary Dingle Hudgens, who was, among other things, an amateur musicologist and a collector of Arkansas music, or what she called the Arkansiana of music. So she was developing her own collection, and she was working with the Arkansas Gazette. And being a good researcher and a diligent librarian and archivist, she was working with the Chicago Public Schools, her daughter, other institutions in Chicago. And so we have her collection of letters that she put together of everyone she talked to, including Florence Price Robertson. And so among those is this letter, which I love, and includes this quote. My file of information about your mother is getting substantial. When I'm gone, my collection will probably go to the University of Arkansas. And she also says, or some educational institution. So she gave the University of Arkansas Libraries more than 3,000 books, a collection of 6 different songs written by Arkansans in their Arkansas Music Collection, and our first collection and the first collection of research materials on Florence Price in any academic library. So back to the troubled material, though. And I do want to talk about the material and how it's available now, including some of the pieces that you're going to hear today. Because it's an amazing story, tragic, but amazing. So the processing of this material, of the addenda, was completed in 2015-16, as I said earlier, but it took a lot of hands to do that. These photos here were actually taken by a conservator when they first saw the materials, when they first got on site. And you can see some troubling evidence, and for archivists in the room, I apologize. You don't like to see these pictures? But this is some of the work that goes on behind the scenes. So on the left here, we have crumpled papers in a box. So the manuscript material in its finished form had to be flattened, had to be dried, had to be arranged, all of that. More crumpled papers in the box over here, then evidence of mold. So one of the reasons what we call MC 988B, which is the addendum that wasn't fully released in 2016, one of the reasons that had to be wait is because it was actually dangerous to use. Not just dangerous for archivists, but dangerous for anyone. And I want to give credit to our facilities management and our vice chancellor for facilities at the University of Arkansas. We worked with us to quarantine the material. This bag over here was how we had to bag up material to move it around. There's some material that had to be disposed of, but we made sure that we got duplications of everything. And it took a couple of years of working with professionals, conservators, to get there. We'll back up for just a second and show these 2 pieces. When I was mentioning My Soul's Been Anchored, the performance by Marian Anderson, these 2 pieces are actually 2 of the songs you're going to hear in a few minutes. But think about that box we just saw with all the crumpled papers in it, and this is what the students are working with. There's a little bit of a difference there. So the one on the right, the poet and his song, was actually in that stage of having to be mitigated and kept away from anybody because of the mold damage. It took several years to get it to the point where it could be available to researchers and then start the process of revising the published works of her and putting it in the hands of performers. So that assessment and treatment took several years. I want to give some credit to one of my fellow colleague archivists from around the country who's also a professional conservator, Rebecca Elder. She visited us a number of times, actually, and she gave me permission to use her pictures. So thank you, Rebecca, again. So she did an assessment of all of the damages, created a plan for us, advised on things that could not be saved. Unfortunately, there were a few items like that, and then helped us get to the point where we could meet the community, our patron, our researchers' demands for getting the material out. So now in these images, you're seeing a jagged edge that's created by vermin, rodents, among other things, and then just wear and tear from having to go in and out of boxes and being moved around. Some of the material, the Gatwoods, to their credit, were trying to save it themselves. They had just put stuff in a suitcase. So that means they were taking things from a box and putting it in a suitcase. So there was damage there. Rusty paper clips. When you decide to donate your papers through the University of Arkansas Libraries, fair warning, we're going to take every paper clip off because those paper clips become a problem. And so those are paper clips that had been on these manuscript materials since at least the 1950s. And so they're starting to rust through the paper and actually corrode into it, and then they have to be removed one at a time. Torn and crumpled and stained pages, stained from probably interaction with animals. Also, the house that the Gatwoods had bought to flip had a big hole in the roof. So the materials being rained and snowed on. This is outside of Chicago for decades. And so there was water damage and rot and all of that. Some of that discoloration, and if you look closely, you might see some pink there on one of those manuscript pages. That's actually mold spreading. And so the pages had mold throughout them. That had to also, the mold had to be killed, had to be mitigated, and then had to be stabilized. I mentioned a waiver earlier. We had to keep a waiver in place because we had to warn people and give people masks to use when using the material, because there still might be some mold there, even though we had done everything possible for a number of years afterwards. And then over there on the right, I'm not sure exactly what that is. I don't want to know, maybe. But that is probably some combination of animal activity and rotting wood in this attic. And so they all had to be cleaned as well. But now look at them. So you can still see some of the damage. Two more pieces that you're going to hear today. The one on the right, which is the little Valiant chair. I think that's one of the ones we're going to hear today. I like this example because you could see where there's rust stains still. There's a little bit of evidence from probably some mold that had been mitigated there. There's damage on the edges, and yet this is how it lives now in our acid-free foldering, ready for anyone to use. So these are invaluable treasures. And we've been a part of that, and now you'll get to enjoy them as soon as I am done with my remarks. But within here, it's composition notes. So this example right here is extensive notes she did on background for, it's almost like a novel reading it. Background she did for a piece that she was working on. But have that context available as source material for anyone means that one of the things that's happened in the last few years is that previously published material can be completely revised now, because now they have more complete pieces. Composers and arrangers have more complete pieces to look and dissect what has been published, but more of the backstory and the thoughts that Florence Price had. And I'll talk more about that in just a second, too. And I mentioned this earlier, between 1975 and today, we've added 6 different collections containing Price materials. And it's not an exaggeration to say that we will have more. I'm pretty sure that we'll have more. And we certainly are going to do our part to make sure that if they're not with us, they're somewhere. And we work weekly with students, performers, and researchers around the world. Our reading room, the most requested object currently at Special Collections, if you wanted to know, is a portrait, a professional portrait of Florence Price. Because so many articles are written about her, we have to put it out there. And we have to say, yep, you can sure use it. And so we have it in a digital form to just transmit it. But at some weeks in peak Florence Price season, we'll have 2 to 3 researchers working with her a week. And sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 or 4 researchers in the room at the same time working with the materials, which is pretty amazing. And we have something like 5 to 10 classes a semester that will come work with her materials too. So that accessibility is one of the things that I'm most proud of as part of Special Collections. I think that we do a really good job of, and it's really important with Florence Price. And these are just screenshots of a computer. But what you're looking at here are actually search results if you put Florence Price into our Special Collections website search engine, including the top of our finding aid, which has a continually updated biographical note. So if anyone wants to know more about her or know the context of the materials, a little bit about her story, the University of Arkansas has pages that say, this is Florence Price, this is the meaning of these materials. And you can search down to specific items. So I apparently had done a search on Tarantella over here and got down to a specific item. But once you're there, there's a little button that says request. So you can request that item, and you'll get a page that says, if you're not registered, please register. And are you coming to visit us, or do you want us to make a copy for you? And you can see over here, it says 189 results just on putting Florence Price into a search engine for different archival objects that came up. And so we're sharing as much as possible all the time. And over here on the left is Violin Concerto No. 2, which I mentioned earlier. It's a very important premiere. And this is how it exists now in that second addendum after it's been cleaned up and ready for use. Down below, this is a photo that we also got with this second addendum. And then on the right is the screenshot of our database. I have these images up here because we've actually scanned these and put these out there online in a digital collection for anyone to find, anyone to download. If there is a 7th grader who is studying piano somewhere and they want to look, or they're studying violin or song, they can find these pieces. And they might not get the complete piece, but they can definitely find enough to continue their research. And they can download it and do citations there. And on the right, that is a screenshot of one page from possibly my favorite thing we have at Special Collections, which is Florence Price's diary, 1947 to 1950. So within this diary, she'll have notes about working with her students, and then she'll jot down ideas that she might bring into a composition. And then she has some reflections on her day. And we've actually digitized the entire diary, and it's there on the website. And of course, the collection continues to grow. This is just a few examples of that. Florence Price being featured on BBC, and this is following a premiere of one of the piano pieces in London. Great performances on PBS. There's too many NPR pages for me to screenshot, so apologies to KOF, but they've done a lot of features of Florence Price. And then on the right over here are just two of what I think are now 3 published and maybe a couple more in progress of children's books about Florence Price. And so when you make these things accessible and you join in with all the musicians, the performers, the researchers, the scholars who are trying to keep this story alive, you could see what the impact is. And so for these 2 books, Who is Florence Price? That one was actually put together by a music school in New York City by high school students. They put it together. It includes objects they found from that same website, our digital collection. They downloaded them. They reached out to our research services and Cassidy Long, who's here in the room with us, to say, can we use this thing? How do we do the citation? And then they published it as a children's book. And on the right, just 2 years ago, which is a new children's book called B Breaks Barriers. Again, where it's written for a child's audience to know that they can take Florence Price's story and accomplish anything they want to as well. And that's all I have for you. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Juting Yang and her students, and you're going to enjoy some amazing examples of art songs. And just to say again, some of these examples in their manuscript form are in the back, and I will bear with me as I scroll. There we go. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Is this working? Okay, great. I'm just going to do a short introduction, and we will leave plenty of time to enjoy the performance today. I'm so lucky and so grateful that my friends at the Special Collections, Joshua and Jennifer, invited us on this journey this afternoon. My first encounter of Florence Price was her infamous letter to the Boston Symphony conductor at the time, Kutsevitsky. And her first sentence was, to begin with, I have 2 handicap. One of my race and one of my sex. And I thought, who is this amazing woman that's just so vulnerable and so comfortable with being vulnerable about who she is and what she wants to accomplish. And so I started researching into her life and her music. And we at the University of Arkansas Music Department, I started a Florence Price International Piano Competition. And last year was our first inaugural year, and it was very successful. We brought a lot of pianists from all over the world. And it was very, very moving to see so many people digging into her music and discovering who she is. And I was looking at the program that we're playing today, and it seems like we are featuring a lot of her songs. And song has a special place in my heart because I feel like songs are the most natural form of music for anybody, because this is our instrument. The instrument is in here. And if I were to describe her music in one word, is sincere, genuine. And during the process of learning these pieces and also teaching to my students, I find that she has a kind of like priceless heart for natural beauty. She was an intellect, and she was very well trained at conservatory level, but she also did not forget her roots. She did not forget who she was as a person. So I see a lot of very educated writing in her music, like pieces that I will be playing and then some of my students will be playing, that in lessons we were just marveling at her harmonic language and the control of harmonies and all of that. And then there will be a moment and then I will hear, oh, this is influence from Gershwin, or she influenced Gershwin, something like that. So during this preparation, 2 or 3 months preparation, I've started to know her more as a person and it's kind of like a little glimpse into her soul as an artist. And I've been, all of my students know and all of my colleagues and friends know that I've been obsessed with East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And to finish with a quote by Steinbeck, but I have a new love for that glittering instrument, the human soul. It is lovely and unique thing in the universe. And through these pieces, I hope that you can find that. And I'm so lucky to have all of my students, wonderful students, who I love very much. So on some days. And my wonderful colleague, Dr. Sarah Kane. And thank you so much, Carla, for helping out last minute with our performance. And I hope you enjoy the performance. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Connor Arterberry. I'm going to be playing a song that's titled, it has 2 titles, Honeysuckle or A Southern Sky. And as my professor just mentioned, this is definitely not the only piece you're going to hear that draws its title from natural beauty. So definitely pay attention to that aesthetic throughout. But also, I just wanted to let you know, this is one of the pieces that you can go see the manuscript that she transcribed with pen back there. So I definitely encourage you to do that as well. Thank you.
I'm Ashley Capshaw. The piece I'm playing is Church Spires in Moonlight.
Thank am Mia Johnson. Miss Carla Summers and I will be performing God Gives Me You, a wedding song.
Hello, my name is Jalzen Redding, and today I will be accompanied by Carla Summers, and we are going to be performing Night by Florence Price.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elam Dimon.
My name is Resonant.
We will be playing Choreopsis, one of Florence Price's floral pieces.
Hello, my name is Dr. Sarah Kane, and Dr. Yang and I will be performing a song set of 2 poems by Paul Lawrence Dunbar, and the pieces are I Grew a Rose, followed by the poet and his song, which are on display in the back for your viewing after the performance. Thank you so much.
It grew for days, I stood desert spot. Sometimes a blight upon a tree takes all my fruit away from me, and then withdraws of bitter pain. Rebellious passions rise and swell. But life is more than fruit or grain, and so I say, and all is well.
I hope you've noticed that she's a hopeless romantic. um, so the next two pieces, even though it's not really a programmatic title, it doesn't really have a story title, but I still think it's about love. I still think it's about seeing the. It's in the spirit of Valentine's Day in a week. So Song Without Words seems like a weird title, but it's actually in kind of a tradition started by Chopin. And Chopin was someone who was the biggest songwriter, but he never wrote a single song, but he wrote in the form of solo piano, in nocturnes, in waltz, in mazurkas. And Mendelssohn later started writing Song Without Words. And I think this is Florence Price paying homage to the composers that everybody revered, Chopin and Mendelssohn. And so with that, I will finish the program, and I hope you will leave with love in your heart.
Thank you again so much to the Department of Music. Wasn't that amazing? And on behalf of the University of Arkansas Library Special Collections, we hope you enjoyed this program. We're going to be around for a few minutes, so please do come enjoy the exhibit with us.
I think she would be really happy for the event today because it's the perfect marriage between scholarly research and the performance and making the music come alive. And I just want to thank Dean Youngblood very much, and also Jennifer Day and everybody in the library to give us this opportunity to share the music with you. Thank you.